Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to Lion's Heart, and in this video we're going to discuss how to reinvent yourself socially. Now, to first understand this topic and how to reinvent your social persona, we first need to understand that the social self is actually an invention, that it's actually made up, and that there actually is no real self inside of there. Now, this is something that monks and yogis and saints have talked about for a long time. But how can we apply this to our real day-to-day life and create a better, more empowering life for ourselves? Right? And that's what we want to get at in this video. So the first thing we need to understand, and you need to understand, is that the one inside of there, the one behind the eyes, the one inside the skull that's listening to this video, that's looking out from the eyes, the one that's hearing me right now, get that sense of yourself, get that feeling of the one in there with the story and the history and the emotions and the life story, right? Do you have a grasp of that person, that persona? And what I'm making here, the claim that I'm making here is that self, that persona is completely invented and that it does not exist. And in fact, it's as real as air. And in fact, air is more real than that self, that sense of self, because air actually has molecules and atoms, right? But your sense of self is completely imaginary. It only exists inside the mind, right? If we cut someone's skull open, if we cut someone's head open, we're not going to find their self-concept, their idea of themselves, right? It's completely imaginary. It's completely conceptual, right? So that gives us a lot of freedom because that tells us that this self that we've created, this character, this role we play, it is completely made up. It doesn't actually exist anywhere. Therefore, we can change it. And we don't have to be attached to these identities and these stories and these limiting beliefs that we have, right? Because in the truth, what's really there is just pure awareness. And this is more going into a meditative discussion, but the truth is that what's actually there is pure awareness. It's pure freedom. There's just hearing happening. There's just seeing happening. What we do as humans is we layer on to hearing and seeing a story of X name, me, is hearing these sounds, or I'm seeing these things, or I'm going through this difficult time, or these things are happening. When in reality, there's just awareness there, right? We add on with our minds conceptually these stories and these self-concepts and these personas about ourselves, right? So this is key to understanding how to reinvent yourself socially, because most of us are completely identified with our conceptual selves and we take it very seriously. We think that it's actually us and that these are the ways that we have to behave and these patterns are us. And so we act consistently with that, right? Now you might question, why does this happen? How does this happen? Why would I create this invented self and then trick myself into thinking that it's really me? Well, one good example that we can look at in nature is kittens, right? We can look at kittens and we can see that kittens, what do they do when they're kittens, right? They play, right? They play hunt, they play tackle each other, they play pounce around, they climb trees and run away from each other. Now, is this just some silly little game that kittens are playing? Or is there a deeper reason for this, right? And there is. The reason is that these kittens are learning how to hunt, right? This is it looks like they're playing, it looks like they're just being silly, but they're learning how to hunt, which is a very essential survival skill for them, right? They need to learn how to do this so that they can bring home food, that they can live in the wild, that they can survive, right? So it's actually, they're not messing around. Like, this is a very serious thing, right? And in a similar way, humans, if you've ever seen children, you know how good they are with their imagination, how much they can create, whether they're wearing a blanket and calling themselves Superman and flying around the house, or if they're pretending the floor is hot lava and they're really in it, right? Like when you see kids playing those kinds of games, they're really in it. Like the floor is hot lava, right? But at the same time, they know they're playing a game, right? You can be like, take the cape off, like it's time for dinner, you know? And they know that the game is over. They can take it off and they can stop playing the game. What happens as adults is that we don't stop playing the game, right? We create, similar to how you can create being Superman or the floor is lava, we create these separate selves, these egos, these characters, these roles, right? And we do it when we're very young. So they become unconscious patterns. It's like that's the software that we're downloading. That's the software that we're programming ourselves with, right? And so at a certain point, when that goes from being something that we're doing to something that's running in the background unconsciously that we're not really aware of, that actually becomes our character. That actually becomes our person. And we think that that is actually what we are, right? So in a sense, we're still playing this imaginary make-believe game, but we're fully grown adults and we're taking it very seriously, right? And the funny thing about this is that it still is that same conceptual ability. It still is that imagination. It still is that game, right? But we've just so normalized it, and it's become such a normal part of our lives and our culture and our societies that we actually still we still take it very seriously because we don't know that it's made up. Now, I have a question for you. Why would this be something that's problematic? Why would this be something that we would want to change? Well, think about it. If you're creating your sense of self at a very young age, your social identity at a very young age, that's basically a 5 to 8-year-old who is determining the character that you're going to be for the rest of your life, right? So basically, there's a 40-year-old fully grown man with a 5-year-old making his decisions about what he's capable of, who he has to be, what he can and can't do, how he has to act, his limiting beliefs, right? A 5 to 8-year-old is basically running the lives of most adults, right? Because they still have many of these core concepts, these core self-beliefs that happened at a very young, a very impressionable age, right? And so their minds, and it's not to anybody's fault, we're coming at this with compassion, but this is just the truth, is that their minds, through survival, started to create this character and create this self-identity because of the experiences, reactions, stories they told themselves about what was happening. And so this created their sense of self, right? And so now they're 40 and they're being run by the same software. So let's say maybe 5-year-old Jack wanted to ask out Cindy Lou, the cutest girl in class, and she said, no, you're ugly, right? And now Jack is 40 and he thinks that he can't approach a woman at a cafe or at a bar or at the library that he's interested in because he still has some kind of core belief that I'm not attractive. The girl that I actually want is not going to be interested in me. I have no chance at getting the highest quality or the woman that I'm the most attracted to, right? And let's also say maybe Jack got picked last in gym class, or Jack, was bullied, or Jack, didn't have many friends or something like that. So then he creates a core belief like, I'm not worthy, I'm not likable, I'm not enough, I'm weird, I'm up, something like that, right? So now Jack is 40 and he's at work and he's not working for a promotion. He's not trying to do really well at the job. He's not going for mastery because he has all of these self-limiting beliefs about himself that were formed at a very young age that are still keeping him stuck, right? And it's kind of ridiculous because these were formed at the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, right? At a very young age when he was a child. And now he's not even close to being who that child was anymore, right? He's a fully grown adult, but he's still embodying, still inside of his mind and still inside of his body are these core beliefs that he is not enough, that he can't do certain things, that he can't excel in life, right? So you can see how this can be problematic. And everybody has these in some form or another. Like we all have these kinds of experiences, these self-limiting beliefs, these stories we tell ourselves that keep us kind of small, that keep us kind of stuck, and that keep us from doing something that we really want to do, right? It keeps us safe. Because at some point in life, we learned that this is the way to be safe, is that if I think of myself this way, then I'm staying safe, right? But we want to crush that in this video. We want to crush that. And what I want to do is tell you how you can change that, and then we can make this from an unconscious process to a conscious process, and you can literally recreate yourself in a much more powerful way. Okay, so let's move this from the unconscious to the conscious, right? And earlier we defined how unconsciously these beliefs and reactions and emotions are running your life, right? And what we need to do is to realize that even though they're unconscious, we're still doing them, right? We're still holding on to these beliefs. We're still holding on to these mindsets, these emotional reactions, right? Because people that maybe they get cut off in traffic and they're pissed. There's also people who get cut off in traffic and they don't really care, right? Same human, same body more or less. But for whatever reason, this person's having that reaction and that person's having this reaction. What's the difference there, right? Well, this person is doing that reaction, right? Because it's not the person cutting them off that's doing the anger that they're experiencing. Clearly, that anger is coming from the person who feels the anger, right? Just like how the person who doesn't get angry at that situation doesn't feel anger, right? But it's the same situation. So we have to realize that all of these emotional reactions, all of these self-beliefs, all of these I can't do it and limiting things are something that we are generating holding on to, attached to, identified with, and doing, right? We're just unconscious of it, right? So what we want to do is we want to bring that unconscious activity to our consciousness, right? And how do we do that? We just do that with awareness. We just do that by bringing our attention to what's happening. Usually we're so externally focused, but how we become masters of this process and how we begin to change our social persona is that we begin to become conscious of this process and see that we're doing these things, right? See that we are creating the anxiety to go talk to the girl, or that we're telling ourselves that we're not good enough for the promotion, or that we need to stay in this relationship, or we need to stay in this job because this is safe, and watch that process as it's happening, right? You don't have to go meditate for 10,000 hours. You don't have to go live in a cave. You don't have to do anything drastic. You just have to become aware of what's happening. You have to become conscious. So bring the intention inward. Notice what's happening in your mind. Notice what's happening in your emotions, and that you're doing these things, right? So that's the first step, right? And the second step is to then stop doing them, right? So it's to become conscious, realize that you're doing this thing, you're doing this reaction, you're doing these beliefs and this character, right? This character that's you're doing it. And then you just kind of, you become conscious of that you're doing it, and then you just kind of stop doing it. And you just let go and you go into nothingness, right? You go into just empty awareness. You just, oh, I don't have to be afraid of this, or I don't have to generate anxiety. I don't have to generate this weird belief that I can't go talk to that girl, right? Because here's another example, right? Let's take two babies, and they're clones, they're twins, but they're the same baby, right? They're not like twins, because twins are sometimes different. Let's take like a totally identical baby and clone it. So it's the same person, right? And we allow baby A to grow up in a very empowering life, right? Like very strong father, very loving mother, great experiences with girls growing up. Like everyone's telling him he's great. He gets a lot of love. He gets a lot of wisdom. He gets a lot of, he has a good head on his shoulders, right? And then baby B, let's say, has a very different, the opposite kind of upbringing, right? Gets yelled at all the time. It's told that it's a piece of shit. It's told that it can't get women, blah, blah, blah. These two babies are going to grow up, even though it's the same person, they're going to grow up, and inside, they're going to have the same body, right? They're the same person. But inside of that body, what's embodying that, the conceptual identity of those people is going to be very, very, very different. They're probably not even going to look the same, right? Their facial structure, their energy, their body language, their posture, their tone, all is going to be very, very different because of the experiences they had, and because of those experiences, the self-concepts that they created, right? But even then, baby B could do enough consciousness work and become aware enough and could actually begin to change all of its core identities and all of these beliefs and all of these traumas and experiences and start to become more like baby A, right? Start to become more like that person, right? And it's really interesting because if you actually learn and understand what I'm talking about and you really get it, you can become anybody you want to be. You can embody James Bond, right? You can walk into a party and be James Bond, right? You can literally create your own conceptual identity as whoever you want to be to attain the goals that you want, right? Like what kind of friends do you want? What kind of dating opportunities do you want? What kind of work do you want, right? And then you can like watch how people who are successful there act and embody and do, and you can begin to change that about yourself, right? And I'm not saying don't be inauthentic. I'm not saying don't still be, what's authentically coming up and like stab yourself in the back just to get a date or just to do well in sales or just to have some friends. You can still, this is a skill, right? You can still be authentic. You just remove all of the crap, the junk that's getting in the way, like all of the neurosis, all of the trauma, all the self-limiting beliefs, right? All of those get out of the way. And usually what you find is what's left of after all that's out of the way, what's left of the authentic self is a naturally pretty cool, chill, charismatic, attractive person, right? And so you can just become that and then skillfully recreate yourself in all of these domains so that you can have more success, more enjoyment, more fun, and just enjoy life a lot more with a lot less, negativity and trauma and fear. And I don't want this to just be theory. You need to go out into the real world and you need to really see this happening in real time, right? The next time you're interacting with people, You don't have to change anything. You don't have to do anything crazy. You don't have to go talk to 5 strangers or do 10 push-ups if you don't. Like, none of this kind of challenges or anything like that. It's just a matter of awareness, right? It doesn't have to be a grind. It doesn't have to be this like deeply uncomfortable thing, right? It's like actually you can change yourself to be the guy that's comfortable talking to women, talking to strangers. Like you just stop doing the things that aren't that, right? And it's difficult because a lot of these are deeply unconscious. They're deeply held patterns, right? But the power is in becoming aware of them as they're happening, right? So you might get this in theory, but when you go out and you start talking to a stranger, trying to make friends or talking to girls, you'll have these reactions and these patterns and this history all come up, right? And you got to be patient with this process, patient and aware. And you have to be really dead set committed to freeing yourself of these patterns, freeing yourself of these identities that aren't helping you, they're dysfunctional, and they're not really you, right? Like, so there doesn't have to be a defending of them. We can just easily let them go. And we can then begin to create ourselves more skillfully in the social domain, create the character that's more skillful, that has more success in the areas we want. But really, what I need to leave you with here is you have to go out there and do it in the real world and see it in practice, right? You have to see yourself creating these reactions, creating these stories, the things your mind's telling you, and you have to call it for the bull that it is, right? And this takes time. This is a process. It takes time. It takes awareness, but you need to actually go out there and do it, right? So that's what I'll leave you with, is to go out into the real world and notice this process happening, and then 1, notice that you're doing it, and then 2, change it. Create something new. Or create nothing. Just be that empty, be nothing, be that empty awareness, be that silence, right? And then begin to relate from there. And I guarantee you that a more cool, calm, confident, and actually more authentic version of who you really are will begin to form, right? Because as I said earlier, this separate self, this ego, this one in here, the one behind the eyes does not exist, right? And that's very freeing. And it's very freeing in the social domain too, because then you don't have to be attached to that self in there. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to promote it. You don't have to protect it, right? You can actually play the game of socializing, play the game of human social dynamics and reality from a much more skilled, poised, confident, cool place. And even maybe in the background with a little smile on your face because you know it's a game, right? And most people don't. And you can be like, I know what's happening. I know what you're doing. We're all wearing these masks, but behind it all, we're all awareness. We're all the same being. Maybe you'll get there. Hopefully you'll get there. But that makes it a lot more fun. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching this. Sending you lots of love from Bali, and talk soon. Cheers.